Welcome back to BSA Talk. We have some questions here as how you get started as a young man as an entrepreneur.
Hi Dave, thank you for having me again on BSA Talks. And today I want to make the most valuable video on YouTube for young people out there, because everyone now is 15, 16, including my own brother, who they see on social media all this flashy stuff like Lamborghinis. People are like, that was 6 months ago where I was working at Pizza Hut 6 months, and then 6 months later now I have this cool flashy car. And the truth to it is just they're selling courses. Mm-hmm. And inside these courses, it's not really much valuable information. It's very general that it doesn't help them, and they just trick them by this flashy stuff. So yes. Today I wanted the video to be very valuable, that people have this $100 or $200 saved up because that's what they live with for their first job they have, and how to turn it to successful income, not to overwhelm yourself in the middle of the journey, and not to get tempted to get the flashy stuff, but instead reinvest to the company, and how to stay on track by the time you're 2021. Everything is paying off.
Yes. The first thing, as if you want to be successful in life, assume that you're going to make that success occur slowly. And if you're 15 or 16, that doesn't mean next week. That means in a few years. But start working for it now. When I was 15 or 16, I measured my bank account in terms of shares of IBM stock, not in terms of a car that I might someday buy. If somebody is showing off flashy things like Lamborghinis and things like that, and trying to get you to buy a course from them, they're making their money from the course, not from anything creative that they've ever done. And that is not the way to become successful. Let's say you're making $100 every 2 weeks, and you're living in a bad home situation, and you're going to school, and you're doing all of these things. How do you break out of that and become successful? I think that's the essence of your question here. The answer is you can do it. It takes work, it takes concentration, and it takes time. But let me break that down into various pieces. Number one, no matter how much or how little money you are making, you can always find a way to save some of it. Save as much of it as you can. Don't buy frivolous things. Don't buy things you do not need. Oh, of course, you go out and have hamburgers with your friends now and again, but don't waste that money. It's the start of where you're going to get rich from. If you have people to help you, if your family is experienced with things like this, that's a blessing, but it isn't a necessity. You can do this largely on your own. Here's what I would suggest. Save some of the money that you're getting. Stay in school. Learn all you can. Learn marketable skills, especially in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Stay in those fields because those are the most valuable if you can. People have made plenty of money in real estate and other fields that are not STEM. But for educational purposes, stay in as long as you can in the high-tech, the technical fields. Go to college. Get a scholarship and convince them to give you a scholarship to go to college. Now, what does that do? That shows that you can convince people to do things. And that's a tremendous benefit in business as you go forward in life. Learn things that will be relevant to you in the career that you want ahead of you. I don't mean learn business stuff. I was a physicist, and yet I've been an entrepreneur almost my entire working life. Save your money, invest your money, do not spend active income on frivolous things. Spend passive income, if you must, on frivolous things. And work hard. Learn to work harder than everyone around you. And learn to work focused. What can be done today should be done today, not tomorrow. At 15 or 16, that seems impossible, but it's not. You can do it. You can learn to do it. That doesn't mean you're a drudge. That doesn't mean you have no friends. It doesn't mean you don't get to date. All of those things are still true. But it means that you're focused at where you want to go in life. And that is probably the biggest advice I would give people, is be focused on your goal of being a success. Not of being greedy, not of being a miser. but of being successful in both life and in business.
And I truly appreciate the advice, Dave. Like, it's really good start to kind of give people what it is like to own a business or being a hard worker. But to touch on 2 points you actually mentioned earlier is, one, you tell them to invest. So now I'm 15, 16, and I have money saved up, let's say $1,000. What do I do? Like, do I go to ChatGPT and just tell them, hey, I have $1,000, where do I invest it? Or what's the right way in today's society?
I can only tell you what I have done and what I've advised my children to do, and they have done it relatively successfully. Because I have been in business, I am much more familiar with the world of stocks and bonds and investment opportunities like that than I am in, say, real estate. From the earliest times, and I was not joking, as a 15 or 16-year-old, I was buying IBM stock and sticking it in my portfolio and keeping it there. I was fortunate. My father worked on Wall Street, so I had at least the experience of doing that. But you don't need that. You can learn this stuff online. I'm hopefully teaching it to you now. Look at what is doing well in a cautious way. What do I mean by that? If I had $100 to invest, and only $100, I would buy an index fund that was a Standard & Poor's index or NASDAQ, QQQ or SPX. I would buy those because that's the broad market. That's the market in which American business operates, and it's very successful, and it tends to grow over time. And I would build up a reserve in that. I would spend some money on things like, Bitcoin or AI stocks. I own NVIDIA and Palantir and a bunch of others. Right. I would spend some money on that as I accumulated it. But at this point, it's conservative investments, but not too conservative, because you want the growth. Far more important than making the investments is learning to make investments for the future. To set aside a cash reserve, because someday you're going to need that money to start a company. And when you have that money, it's so much easier than going and asking somebody else for it. And it's so much easier to ask somebody else for it when you don't need it. Learn that lesson. Learn to build your reserves, learn to trust your judgment, learn to have judgment worth trusting, and the way you do that is experience. You don't acquire that experience in one day. You don't get rich in one day. Pay no attention to the people who say, I can make you rich in 6 months. They can make them richer in 6 months on your money, but they're very unlikely to make you rich. Of course, there are exceptions to these rules. But the way to bet is getting rich slowly, and that's what I strongly recommend.
Right, and I appreciate the advice, Dave, on how to invest. But another point I also want to touch on, that now we talked about investment, is back to the college point. A lot of people nowadays tell you, you go to college for 4 years, spend like $100K tuition in those 4 years, and you learn skills, and school doesn't even teach you about business, and it's just a rat race and all of that. So you said learn high tech, and I want to touch more on that, because people think that in those 4 years they can build a business. It can be such as more going further than if they had a degree in those 4 years.
College is definitely not for everyone. But what I learned in college, and I think most people who are successful in college learn, is how to think, how to make rational decisions, how to say, this is the choice I should make versus that one. And technology, because it's logical, because it's dealing with the real world out there, teaches you how to make rational decisions involving the real world. And that is something you will need in business. Wishful thinking will get you nowhere in business. And if you want to major in underwater basket weaving, go ahead and do so, but you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money if you want to be a success in business. It doesn't have to be STEM. It doesn't have to be math or science. But if it is, you'll learn better how to think, how to make decisions. Take other courses too, but learn. Learn how to learn. If you learn nothing else in college, learning how to learn, how to go get other information, how to find things online, how to pick a new subject and decide you're going to learn everything there is to learn about it, how to acquire a new skill. Those are the things that I learned in college. Now, if you can learn them elsewhere, learn them elsewhere, and save the money and invest it. That's fine. That depends on the person. I needed a structured environment. Not everybody does.
Right. And now that we talked about investing and college, now I'm out of college. I have my money in stocks. I think I made good returns. How do I make sure I'm going in the right way? Do I want to invest in real estate? Do I want to start a company? How do I find the real passion for me?
It almost doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that trivially. Far better guide than a rational decision between real estate and stock investment and hedge funds and working for a company or starting your own. Far more important than making that decision is knowing where your passion lies. What do you love to do? If you've taught yourself to think, if you've taught yourself to work in the real world and keep your mind focused on the real world, then what you love is a good guide to where you'll be successful. That would be my advice, is to follow your love. Not your trivial fashion of the week, but that which has, because you have accumulated all this experience, all this knowledge, out of all those things, what is it that drives you? What is it that makes you get up in the morning? What is it that makes you happy to do? Because those are the things you'll stick to when times are rough and when times are hard. And believe me, if you want to be an entrepreneur, they're going to be rough.
Right.
And there are also going to be some wonderful ones. But pay attention to what you love and go that way. For me, I loved the stock stuff, probably because my father introduced me to it early on. There are others who love real estate, more than that. There are others who love simply working for someone. That's fine. If you work for someone, and I recommend that the 15 or 16-year-old get summer jobs, internships, whatever it can get, be the best employee you can possibly be. Learn as much as you can from that employer. Do the best job you can, because you're going to need recommendations from that person going on. Use them as a ladder. I'm not saying you're mistreating them. Do the work they need, do it as well as you possibly can, and they will repay you by introducing you to other people. And that is the way to success.
Right, and I think that's really good fact to state. And I want to touch on the point of, now that we kind of covered most of how to become successful in life, how to not overwhelm myself during the journey. How do I make sure I don't fall into the temptation of, I want to buy Gucci bag or, you know, a new iPhone or whatever. How do I make sure I stay in the loop of just grinding, reinvesting, and putting that money back into the business?
I have never seen a successful business that didn't take its resources in the early years and pump them back into the company to make it grow. It didn't pay dividends. It didn't buy, luxury cars. It put it back into the company on things that were reasonable purchases to expand the company. And the same thing is true with your personal wealth, is to do that. As I said before, buy your luxuries out of passive income, not out of active income. How do you not get overwhelmed? It is very easy when you first start making money to say, oh, I've got all this money, I can spend it. Let your attitude be, I've got all this money, I can invest it. Spend some, of course, but for the most part, it goes into your investments. Because money that is spent is gone. Money that is invested is there for tomorrow. And tomorrow comes a whole heck of a lot faster than you think it does.
Right. And the thing is, people listen to that, but they don't have actual practices of making sure they don't stay overwhelmed. So they recommend that maybe they should play a sport next to their business, or maybe they should put a schedule down, or what's the physical act they should be able to do to actually stay in balance, and making sure on the bad days they have something that it can push them to be greater.
The way that a company becomes successful, and I've never seen a company that didn't do this be successful, is to have a business plan. In other words, what are they selling? How are they going to expand it? Where are they going to get the people that they need? Have a business plan for your life. It doesn't have to be something long and elaborate, but it has to be something you stick to. So I'm going to finish high school. I'm going to work these summer jobs in real fields that are real interest to me, that can give me real education. I'm going to go to college, if I decide to, in an area, in a field that is to my benefit. And by the way, don't underestimate the importance of your classmates in college for being able to help you as time goes on. I, once upon a time, needed to meet a particular congressman. And I called up a person I went to college with, and he picked up the phone and called the congressman, and I was meeting with him the next day. That's what contacts mean. I'm not exploiting or using anybody. He was glad to do that because we were friends from college. There's many things you acquire along the way: high school, summer jobs, real jobs, college, that are useful for you in ways you don't know now and you can't see now. So get as many experiences as you can. The other way people get overwhelmed is they try to do too many things. Concentrate on a few. As I said, for your education and employment, what turns you on? What makes you happy, but make sure it's useful first.
Right. And that leaves me here of like, now let's say I'm successful, I'm doing well, I'm making more than average income. What's the best way to now scale, make sure I have things set ahead for my family, and if I, for example, God forbid, to pass out, how do I make sure I'm not leaving debt behind by all these loans in real estate, for example, but instead is they have wealth that they can just live off?
I'm a firm believer in insurance. As boring as it is, I've always had life insurance that would make sure that my family was well taken care of. I get mine through professional organizations like IEEE and things like that, and then very reasonably priced, and for several $1 million, it's not that expensive. So make sure that your family is protected in case you happen to step in front of a truck, until such times you have sufficient money that it doesn't matter. So there are simple conservative things that back you up, that are there in case something goes wrong. But by far the most important is what to do when things go right. You know, what happens if you win? Be prepared to win. Be prepared to, when you have a success in a business, when you have a business endeavor, even if it's just like you're rebranding something and reselling it, and all of a sudden you've got money coming in. Understand why you have the money coming in, and understand how to use that money to make sure you have more money coming in the future, not necessarily in the same field.
Right.
I always recommend general broad investments like the stock market and things like that. Why? Because they're a good basis for whatever you want to do in the future, because you've got that money. If you've spent the money on a Lamborghini, you don't have that money. And so you may not be able to start a company you wanted to start. Oh, there's another secret, by the way, with starting companies. If you have a great deal of money in reserve, other people will give you money or will invest in you. It's just a rule. The less you need money, the more eager people are to give it to you.
Right.
Just learn that lesson early on.
Right. And I don't want to make it too long on the audience here, but instead, I actually want to wrap it up to our exciting announcement that we're going to have after this. Is we want to start something very special for our audience, and it's completely free because it's the best part, and we want to teach them more in details about what we just discussed. So what would be your final advice here before we introduce that thing?
My final advice to people is learn everything you can about whatever field you're interested in going into, in my case, business. Learn everything you can, but make your own decisions. Listen to everyone, but form your own life and live independently.
And I really appreciate giving the advice today, Dave, and having me here on the channel. And next will be the clip of the new thing we've been working hard on for very long, and it's introduced here by Dave. And I think it's very beneficial because it's completely free, $0 for people who don't got money to invest, but instead want to learn by a real mentor, and it doesn't cost you any cent.
And there's a lot of wounds in everything that's in there that I bear.
Right. And I got nothing to hide here, so you will see in the next clip, and I'm excited for you guys.
I want to share with you something that I've been working on for a long time that is very important to me, and that is a Discord channel for business. On it, there will be a lot of free information, but also access to me, so you can have the ability to ask me questions and I can respond to your particular problems and difficulties and also help you get started. I'm really looking forward to being able to interact with you individually on there. I look forward to seeing everybody on there, and I will be waiting for you.